Hello students, next let us look at velocity sensors. Basically, velocity sensor is a position or a displacement sensor itself most of the time, and we basically work on its signal. That means, suppose if we are having a displacement sensor, if we are having a displacement sensor, we get the signal output we get a signal output which is displacement. And what is displacement? Displacement is the distance moved. Okay, distance moved. So let me write it as dx. Now, if I am going to look at what is the distance moved per unit time, or let me say the displacement is delta t. Okay, I will not write dt, I will write it as delta t. So if the displacement is delta x, then if I divide it by what is the time period that we have got that displacement, that is going to be the velocity. That is what we have studied about velocity. Velocity is the displacement per unit time. Displacement per unit time. So suppose if you are having this encoder, we have already studied encoder where we get this pulse output, isn't it? Where each pulse means that each reflective or the opaque area or the transparent area has of the encoder has passed. So by looking at what the pulse is, we can say that within this much duration of time we have got 4 steps. So we know what is the distance. Now if at some other time we get the signal like this, during the same or during some amount of time, if we get the pulse like this, what it means, instead of 4 now we are having 9 steps gone, the same duration of time. So we can say that now the velocity is more. So velocity sensors are basically, first is directly from the encoders, where I said that we look at the number of signals, received in a given length of time. So we count that, and then we divide that delta x by delta t, the time period taken, and we can calculate the velocity. The issue is that this will become inaccurate. When does it become inaccurate? Now talking about the accuracy of these kind of velocity sensors made out of encoders, it basically depends on how many steps are there. For suppose if your encoder has, we told that there are alternate opaque and transparent areas from which light will either pass or it will not pass. So if it is passing, there is a pulse. Now if you want to have a more accurate reading, that will be obtained only when the length of time duration is taken to be small. And if the length of time is reduced, the problem is that within one duration we may get only one pulse. So within a very small duration we want large number of pulses so that we are able to have better accuracy of the velocity. So if we want to have large number of pulses, what has to be there is, in the encoder, the step between an opaque and a transparent region, that step should be as small as possible. For example, these two sections are opaque section and the middle portion is the transparent section. So if there is a LED in this side, light will pass through and it will be detected by the photo detector in the other side. And so if this is moving, then what I am telling is that this alternate steps should be very, 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 very close. Then you will have a better and better accuracy of the velocity. Okay, so how do you calculate that? As I told you, the physical sensor is the same. The encoders that we have discussed for position or displacement sensor, it is the same. The signal that is coming from there, that is taken and that is used in the controller to calculate the velocity using this formula. That means how many pulses within duration of time, that will be used for calculating the velocity. Okay, now there is another way, and that is a very unique way and very intriguing way. The good thing about it is that it will give you very accurate results, but there is very important thing that has to be there, and that is this position signal is clean. This statement that is written here, that the position signal is clean, is one of the biggest requirement. Let me zoom in a bit more. Okay, so what is happening here? See here, when we say the differentiation of the position signal, it means that we know very mathematically, we know an equation about velocity. Velocity is the rate of change of distance with respect to time, dx by dt. So if you are having the position, so what is the position? Position is basically, or displacement, okay, position or displacement, it is x with respect to time. So you may have a signal, the position is going, the value is increasing, or the value may be decreasing, or again it may be increasing. So all these is the position signal. Okay, the position may have also a positive or a negative value. For example, if I am going to draw an axis like this, let me draw it more clearly. If suppose I am having an axis like this, okay, and based on that I am going to have a velocity signal. Let's say this is the time t is equal to 0. So suppose if I am slowly, it is increasing, then sometimes it goes negative, then again it is increasing. So this is the position signal. Okay, this is x and this is the time axis t. So we will get various position value. If I am going to differentiate this, generally what is the meaning of differentiation? Differentiation means delta x by delta y, or taking the slope, that is delta x by delta y, or sorry, delta t, delta x by delta t, this is t. So this much is delta t and this much is delta x. Here also we can find out delta t by delta delta x by delta t. The only thing is that here delta x will be negative, okay, negative, and delta t will be positive. So we will get a negative acceleration or a deceleration. Okay, so if the signal is going up, it means, if the position is increasing, it means it is acceleration. If it is decreasing, it means that it is decelerating. Okay, going in the opposite direction. Now, if I am going to differentiate this signal, mathematically differentiate it, I will get basically with respect to time, I will get what is called as the dx by dt, and that is basically the velocity signal. And that velocity signal, based on the value here, the velocity is basically some velocity because it is increasing, and because it is decreasing, its velocity is something else. Again, the velocity is increasing, the position is increasing linearly, so the velocity is something, and then we are having from here, slowly it will go down, and then it will have some negative deceleration. So it is decelerating up to this much point, it is having some negative velocity or deceleration. Okay, so the velocity will be the differentiation of the position signal. But it's very, very important that the position signal is clean. Why I am saying this? For explaining that, let me again, redraw this one. Let me again redraw an axis. Okay. Now, if I am taking a signal which looks something like this, and then like this, and then like this, then everywhere I am going to take the slope. So here the velocity will be given by this, here the velocity will be given by this delta x by delta t, and here the velocity will be given by this delta x by delta t. Okay, everywhere I am taking a slope. So this is a very clean signal. Which one? The green one is a very clean signal. Clean signal. It does not have any unnecessarily complicating spikes. So if I am going to take the velocity, so for this much portion the velocity will be some positive value, and from here the velocity will be some negative value. Again here the velocity will be some positive value, but not as the first one, because as you can see the rise is very small. The change in x is very small with respect to time. So here the velocity will be there, but it will be some lower value than what you had here. Now this signal is very, very clean, so we are getting this. Now let me draw an unclean signal, or a signal with full of noise. Okay, so you will understand what is happening there. So now consider a signal which I have got from a sensor which looks something like this. Okay, let me redraw it. So I am not drawing a straight line up, I am drawing a spiky signal. Okay, previously it was a very smooth clean signal. Now it is not a very clean signal, it is a spiky signal. So what will happen? What will happen here is, if I am going to take the velocity will have, see, when it is going up it is okay, when it is coming down, even a small spike, I will get suddenly a very negative velocity. So basically a spiky signal differentiation will give me a velocity signal which basically looks like this. Okay, so you can see here I am getting negative velocity, but it's all in the shape of pulses. It's not as clean as I got it previously. Why? Because the velocity signal itself is having spikes which, at this much duration the spike will be positive, and here it will be the deceleration value, or it will be negative. So here the slope is positive and here the slope is negative for the case of spike. So I will not have a single value. If I would have a clean signal, I will have a single value of velocity, but if I am having a spiky one, I will have the velocity value changing. I will have the velocity value in terms of pulses. And that's why when you are using the differentiation of the signal, when you are trying to use the differentiation of the position signal to calculate the velocity, it is very important that the position signal that you are having is very clean. Okay, now based on this we use a circuit which acts as a differentiator. So here you can see, this is a differentiator circuit. Okay, and here we have used an op-amp. For people from computer science department, op-amp IC is operational amplifier, okay, which is basically IC 741. Sometimes you may have studied it in your 12th standard, very basic. So there is no need for you to study this circuit, but what you have to understand here is that this is the basic circuit diagram of a differentiator circuit. You will have a capacitor here and a resistor here. The same configuration is used for integrator, but the position of capacitor and resistor are interchanged, and this becomes an integrator. So a differentiator, so this much part, this much differentiator, if you are going to give an input signal which is the position signal, at the output you will get the velocity signal. And if you are having an integrator, the integrator will basically have as an input a velocity signal, and the output you will get the position signal. Okay, the output you will get a position signal. So this is the second way of how we calculate the velocity. The first way I already told is basically using the encoder directly that you have used for finding out the position. You use delta x by delta t, and for the differentiation part you basically differentiate the position signal. Okay. Next, let us go to the acceleration sensor. Now, acceleration sensor, as the name suggests, again we might be thinking that okay, if we have the position signal x, and if we differentiate it with respect to time, we are having the velocity, and we all know that the acceleration is basically differentiation of velocity dv by dt, correct? Differentiation of velocity. That means, in another way I can also say that acceleration will be given by the double differentiation of the position signal. Okay, but this is not very good approach, because as I already told that the signal, the x signal, has to be a very clean signal. For velocity we are getting pulses. If it's not a clean signal, then you can imagine how much how much bad the signal will look when we are trying to calculate the acceleration, because we are going to double differentiate a unclean signal or a noisy signal. Okay, so for that what we use is basically a strain gauge. Okay, so what is the technique? The other technique that we use is, let me tell you, we do not differentiate it because that is not going to give a very good result. So for accelerator sensor, what we have, the technique is, we know that force on any body is basically the mass into acceleration. That means how much acceleration is being experienced by a body, that much force it will exist, that much force it will exert. Okay, now imagine that you are having a frame like this. Okay, you are having a frame like this, and in this frame you have attached a mass connected to a spring. Okay, you have attached a mass connected to a spring. Now suppose this setup is kept inside a body which is accelerating. So suppose it is accelerating in this direction. Because it is accelerating in this direction, this mass will experience a force, and that force will be, so let me draw that a little bit bigger. So it's a spring like this, and then there is a mass attached to it. Okay, so when the acceleration is being experienced by this mass, it will experience a force, and that force, if you are able to measure by looking at this spring, somehow you are able to measure by looking at this spring, then in a way you would have measured the acceleration, because force is equal to mass into acceleration. So if you have calculated the force and you already know what is the mass, then acceleration will be force divided by mass. Clear? It will be force divided by mass. So if there is an object which is moving, now I have drawn only one direction, so you might be assuming, how can we measure it for any which direction? This is a very crude setup that I have showed, but basically this is the same technique that is there even in your mobile phone, which is basically called as a gyroscope. Gyroscope is also having this kind of a technique only. The only thing is that gyroscope will try to take an XYZ direction force. So it will try to calculate the force in X direction, in Y direction, and also in the Z direction, a gyroscope. So you will get the resultant force will be, whatever forces in the x direction plus whatever forces in the y direction plus whatever forces in the z direction. The vector addition of that will give in which direction the force is there. And based on that, you can calculate what is the direction of acceleration, because force is a vector quantity, mass is a scalar quantity, and acceleration is again a vector quantity. So whatever is the direction of force you are getting, that is the same direction of the acceleration, because mass is not having any direction. So if you have such a setup wherein by looking at the spring you are getting to know what is the force being experienced by the pull of this mass because of this acceleration, you will be able to find out what is the acceleration by simply taking F divided by m, and as I said, the direction will be directly given by F. So this is the same thing that is there even in your mobile phones. Okay, but now it's very small. The sensor is very small. In initial days it used to be big, now it's very small. So now we are coming to this spring, because the spring is something that is called as a strain gauge. And strain gauge I will explain you shortly when we will go to the other section. But a strain gauge, basically what it does is, as the shape of the spring changes, the resistance of the strain gauge changes. Resistance means I am talking about the resistance to current. So if I am having a resistance whose value is variable, the current that is passing through the resistance will vary. Similarly, when there is a force experienced by this, it will deform the spring. The spring will either elongate, or if it is in the opposite direction, it will constrict. It will compress. So either it will expand or it will compress. So based on that, the resistance value will change, because of which the current that is flowing through it will change. And by looking at the current, or by some method, if we are able to calculate what is the change in resistance, we will be able to calculate what is the change in force, and with that we will be able to calculate what is the acceleration. So using a strain gauge in case of a spring here, we are able to basically find out the acceleration that is present there. Okay, see, all these diagrams are not drawn in this particular case. You can draw it in your notes. When I provide you the notes, there are there are places where I have left a gap. Okay, there you can obviously draw all these diagrams that I am using for explanation, because if you want to draw it for your examination, well and good. Okay, now I'll come back to this equation after I teach you the strain gauge. So what is happening is, have a look here. Here force can be equal to mass into acceleration. So within this equation, if I want to find what is acceleration, I have to take the mass the other side, and that is what is there in this equation. Okay, where R is the value of the strain gauge, the resistance of the strain gauge, normal resistance, delta R is the change in resistance, S is the surface area, E is the Young's modulus of the strain gauge, S is the surface area of the strain gauge, and C is the deformation constant of the strain gauge. So if you know these values, these are constant. E is constant, S, C, these are all constant. What is changing is delta R, and that delta R value change will give me the value of A. But how do you find that out? That we will see shortly. Okay, so this is one of the most easiest method, with one of the most accurate method, and that is what is written here, that we use. So here what the method what they have said is that if you are able to balance it with some other force and try to take that force, it's one and the same thing. So no problem. Okay. Next is the force and the pressure sensor. There are three kinds. One is a piezoelectric sensor, another is a force sensing sensor. Okay, and the third one is the strain gauges. So when we reach here, we will see what is the strain gauge. Before that, let us talk about the piezoelectric and the force sensing resistor. First, the piezoelectric. What is a piezoelectric material? See, if you are having two metal plates, okay, one in this side and one in this side, two metals, and in between if you are going to keep a piezoelectric material, you are going to keep a piezoelectric material, let me write it as P. The piezoelectric material, if it is compressed from one side, then it will develop a potential across the plates. And it is vice versa. That means if you are going to take this side and you connect it to a battery, then when the current flows, this will compress. The piezoelectric will compress. So it is vice versa. If you compress this, you will get a voltage out of it, which you can actually measure using a voltmeter. So if I am going to connect a voltmeter here, which measures what is the voltage that is getting developed when I am going to compress this piezoelectric from from both the sides, then while looking at this voltage signal, I will be able to understand how much pressure or force is getting applied. See, the same thing that you can apply, the same thing you can use for the case of the, previously I talked to you about the mass and the spring, isn't it? So if suppose you are connecting one end of the piezoelectric, you are connecting to a surface, okay, and the other end of the plate, you are connecting it to a mass, okay, and because this is experiencing an acceleration in this direction, and suppose there is no spring here, I don't want to draw a spring here, that should be wrong. Okay, suppose instead of a spring I am now having the piezoelectric and it is directly connected to this mass, and this is not having any elasticity. The string is it's not a string, it's a very rigid material. Then when there is an acceleration occurring in this direction, then there will be a force with which this plate will be pulled, isn't it? With respect to this fixed surface, this is going to be pulled, and if I am going to measure what is the voltage, then I will get some voltage value, which is a negative voltage value. Okay, so compression and expansion will tell me how much force is there. Just like that, I can use it for a force and pressure sensor. How? If suppose there is a gripper in the robot, okay, if there is a gripper in the robot, and here at one end of the tip of the gripper, if suppose I am attaching a piezoelectric sensor, then if there is a object that is being compressed or pressed by the gripper, so suppose this is the object which is being pressed by the gripper is basically trying to apply force in this and this direction. So it's just like a hand, okay, it's like a hand which is closing. So you will see that whatever is the pressure, that pressure will be sensed by this piezoelectric sensor here, and that will tell how much amount of force or pressure is being applied. Okay, now you might be getting confused when you read this is used in phonograph to create a voltage from a variable pressure caused by the grooves of the record. It's basically telling about how a phonograph works, which is no need for you to remember this, so you can skip that sentence. But basically a piece of piezoelectric can be used to measure the forces. That is the basic piezoelectric material. The other is a phase force sensing resistor. Now this is something very interesting. Let me take to the other slide and let me explain it by a diagram. Okay, now what is a force sensing resistor? Okay, now suppose there is a very there is an electrode which is something like this. Okay, this is the physical shape of the electrode. Okay, so this is the electrode and I am connecting a battery to it. Okay, I am connecting a battery to it and I am connecting a current ammeter. So how much current is flowing through this circuit will be decided by what is the resistance of this electrode. Okay, it's very small. Now on top of this, suppose I am putting a thin layer of some material which has two kinds of particle. One kind is conducting particle. Okay, so these are all conducting particles. So it's throughout the material, polymer, or it might be paint kind of material, some elastic material. Okay, so this is the conducting material. Okay, now these are the dots. Okay, now in between this there are non-conducting materials also, suppose. Okay, and this is drawn by the red ones. Okay, or you can see that this material is totally non-conducting, within which the green dots are the conducting material. Now suppose some force is being applied in this direction. Okay, some force is being applied in this direction. What will happen? This side will basically compress. When it compresses and it comes to very small distance, then all these green material that we had in this non-conducting material, they will all get inside these grooves, or they will all get inside this electrode, and because of which suddenly you will find that the resistance of this electrode has gone down and more current is basically flowing through the circuit. Why? Because some force was being applied on this surface. That is basically what is called as a force sensing resistor, or FSR. It's a polymer. That's why I said it's this material is a polymer, which is the non-conducting material, thick film device that exhibits a decreasing resistance with increasing force applied. So that is the force that I have applied here. Okay, so now this material is people have come out with very good ideas. Some of them provide it as polymer sheets, so directly it is a sheet which you can cut and you can paste it anywhere and you can connect the electrodes, and directly you will be able to connect it with this battery and current sensing directly. So it will be just like a small film, polymer sheet, or sometimes it is like paint. Directly it's like ink, which is applied by screen printing method. Okay, and that is how we are having the FSR. Okay, the good point, the advantage of FSR is that its size is very small. So if I am talking about some surface where I have to measure, I can stick it like a sellotape. Okay, it is low cost and it is very resistant to shock. That means it is not very easily damaged. But what is the disadvantage of it is it's low precision. The precision is low. Okay, and that is what is a force sensing resistor. Similar to this, we have something that is called as a force sensing capacitor. What will be there in that is there will be a polymer, and on top of the polymer there will be two conducting layers. One conducting layer is this one and another conducting layer is this one, and we can basically measure what is the capacitance between this. Now suppose if force is applied on either side, this will compress, this material will compress, and the distance between the plates, that will go down. When the distance between the plate goes down, the capacitance value changes. So we can measure the force by the changing capacitance value And as far as the sensitivity is concerned, this force sensing capacitors are more sensitive. Okay, but obviously it requires a more complicated electronic circuits to detect. Now we are coming to the main section of strain gauges. What is a strain gauge? Now, you all have studied that the resistance of a conductor, suppose if this is a conductor, the resistance of this conductor will depend on the length of the conductor. It will also depend on the cross-sectional area of the conductor, and it will depend on the material which is given by resistivity. And you all might have learnt in your 12th standard this formula that the resistance is given by rho L by A. So resistance is directly proportional to length and inversely proportional to area. So if the area reduces, the resistance will increase. If the length increases, the resistance will increase. Okay. Now, based on this, what is a strain gauge? A strain gauge is basically a conductor which I am right now drawing it like this. Now, if I am going to compress this, then what I will find out is that, and if the material is compressible, sometimes you might think, how can a metal compress so much? No, we are not talking about just metal, we are basically talking about a material which is compressible. Okay, a conductor which is compressible. In such case, what will happen is that the material will compress and its length will go down, but its surface area will increase. Okay. So if the surface area increases, here we have seen if the surface area increases, the resistance goes down. If the length goes down, resistance will also go down. So here both the resistance will change, both due to a higher cross section area and a lower length. So if it is compressing, then the resistance will be, the new resistance will be low. So the resistance will go down. Whereas if I am going to elongate this same material, if this material is, I am applying a force, this time not of compression, but this time suppose if I am going to apply a force of expansion, that means I am going to pull from either side, what will happen is I am going to have a material extending in length and reducing in cross section area. So the length will increase. Okay. So again, if I am going to look at this particular formula, what we will find is when the length increases, when we are applying the force in this direction, this one elongates, because of which the length will increase and the area will go down. The area goes down, the resistance will go up. Again, if the length goes up, the resistance will go up. So because of this opposite force, the resistance will now increase. So here we will have an increasing in resistance. So based on the strain that the material is undergoing, the resistance of the material is basically changing. And that is what is happening in a strain gauge. And based on that, we can calculate it. So this is how generally a strain gauge is basically drawn. Okay. So the material is basically kept it in this direction, but when we are applying a pressure, what will happen? Either this will expand, because of which the length will increase, or it will compress. Okay. So this is the strain gauge. Now how do we find it out? How do we find how much strain or how much pressure is there or force is getting measured? How do we find out that? We can find that out by considering this Wheaton's bridge. Now let me expand that again a little bit. Okay. What's a Wheaton's bridge? A Wheaton's bridge is basically talking about this this arrangement of resistance such that whatever is the potential developed in A, VA, and what is the potential developed in VB, both of them are same. So VA is equal to VB. If this potential is same as this potential, then no current will flow through this wire. No current will flow through this wire. So the galvanometer, which is there in the center, which I have written it as G, the galvanometer will not shift. What does the galvanometer does? A galvanometer only senses if there is a flow of current. Okay, so I can sense if there is a current flow. If there is no current flow, it means that the Wheatstone's bridge is balanced. So initially, when the strain gauge is not applied any strain or any force, what we do is we try to calculate the value of R1, R2, R3 in such a way that the bridge is balanced. And what is the formula for that? The formula for that is R1 by R4 should be equal to R2 by R3. Let me write that here. R1 by R4 should be equal to R2 by R3. Now, R4 is my strain gauge. Okay, this is my strain gauge. Suppose if a strain is being felt here, the value of R4 will change. It may go up or it may go down. We don't know. Suppose if it goes up, then this value will go, this value will reduce, because of which now the potential will not be same. They will be unequal and current will flow in one of the direction. Either it will flow from A to B or it may flow from B to A. Anyway, suppose if it is flowing from A to B, then the opposite effect will happen when the resistance goes down. So if the resistance is going down, then the current that is flowing will be in the opposite direction, because in that case the potential of B will be greater than potential of A. So using a strain gauge with the Wheatstone's bridge, we will be able to find out what is the change in resistance. Okay, now how do we do that? What is the resistance value? We have to find that out. So is the robot going to always calculate the resistance? It will always going to calculate it by this formula? No. What it does is, see, if R4 is reducing, now R1 and suppose R2 are same. Okay, R1 and R2 are suppose same. And if suppose I am having in R3 a resistance which changes due to an application of some current, suppose something I am applying here, because of which R3 is also varying, then all I have to do is, whenever a pressure is applied at R4, the galvanometer will basically show that some current is flowing. Then I will have to make changes in R3. I will have to reduce the value of R3, which will make the galvanometer give a zero value. That means there is no current flowing. So what are we doing here? What did I say? What are we doing? What we are doing is, in this equation, we know that the strain gauge will change according to the value of strain. It may go down or it may go up. If we are able to change the value of R3, whenever there is a strain applied to R4, I will try to change R3 so that the galvanometer is not moving, or VA is going to be equal to VB. I will always try to maintain VA is equal to VB by changing the value of R3. But I am changing, or the robot or the controller is changing the R3. So basically it will be able to understand what is the resistance of R4 by looking at R3, which is changing for making the galvanometer point to zero current. Okay, so that is how we find out the value of R4, and once we have found out R4, we can find out what is the force or the pressure that is being applied, and that is basically how a strain gauge works. Okay, so with this we end the force and the pressure sensor. So today we have discussed velocity sensor, which was, let me review it. Okay, today we had studied the velocity sensors, acceleration sensors. Okay, let me start from here. So velocity sensors we had studied, which basically was using the same position sensor encoder. The controller will basically calculate what is V. Or if we have a very clean signal, clean position signal, we will differentiate and try to find out what is the velocity using a differentiator. Then for calculation of acceleration sensors, we can use strain gauge to basically calculate what is the force, and once we know the force, we calculate the acceleration using the formula. Okay. And next we are having the force and pressure sensor. One of the method is piezoelectric, another is force sensing resistor or force sensing capacitor. And then we are having strain gauges using strain gauges used with Wheaton's bridge. Okay, thank you.